I will accept that as a request now. But that's the last one of those, okay? So, anyway, can we call a roll, please?
Good evening, Commissioner John Roth.
Here.
Good evening, Commissioner John Snell.
Here.
Good evening, Commissioner John Petty.
Here.
Good evening, Commissioner Jim Porras.
Here.
Good evening, Commissioner James Zapardo.
Here.
Would you all rise and join me in salute to our flag?
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to talk for just a little while here, probably about 8 to 10 minutes. First of all, I hope you've all found a speaking request letter. You're outside with Ms. Teresa Harness, and please fill it out completely. I usually tell people if you write your name legibly, I will try to pronounce it correctly, but I won't guarantee that. Also, indicate whether you're the applicant, whether you're a neighbor, or anything else. If you have a position you wish to speak, please mark that, because you will not be allowed to speak unless you have indicated so. Up to 4 people can donate an individual their time of 2 minutes. So, if you want to make it, one person gets to speak for 10 minutes, and 4 of you can donate your time to that one person. What I want to make really clear there is that you cannot speak again on your 2 minutes if you donate your time. And last but not least, in the bottom of the speaker's list, you can indicate whether you're in favor, whether you're in a neutral position, or whether you're opposed to this project. And I would encourage you to read the back. It's got some of the ground rules that we generally go by, which I will try to go over here in just a minute. Another item that usually comes up, if you've got a cell phone, please put it on vibrate or turn it off. They disrupt the hearing and slow everything down. I'd like to take this opportunity to also thank Mr. Kirk Howell and the board and pastor of this church for setting up this particular venue so that you folks in the Temecula area would not have to drive into Riverside and the convention center. We're going to get to that in a minute. Okay, I'd like to introduce the people that are up here so you know who the players are at least. On my far right is Commissioner John Snell. He is the vice chair of this commission. And in the event that I'm unable to proceed, Commissioner Snell will handle the proceedings. He's from the 2nd District, which is generally Corona Norco, and areas north of the Santa Ana River. He was appointed by Supervisor John Temecula. Adjacent to him is Mr. John Petty. He's in the 3rd District, which is Harvest Valley, San Jacinto, Emmett, and the western communities up on Mount San Jacinto. He was appointed by someone you probably all know, Supervisor Jeff Stone. Next to me is Ms. Carolyn Sims-Lumen. She is the County Planning Director. She will provide the Planning Commission with information regarding any land use issues. She's been with the county since the early 1980s, and she is well versed on land use. I am John Roth. I'm in the 1st District, which includes the Temecula Valley, Lake Matthews, and Murrieta, and Wildemar. I was appointed by Supervisor Bob Buster, and for those of you who might be interested, the project today is in the 1st District. On my left is Michelle Clapp. She is the Planning Commission Counsel. She will provide the PC with support and counsel regarding any legal issues that we might get into. Adjacent to her is Mr. Jim Porras. These are the 4th district. That's like the eastern slopes of Mount San Jacinto, the Coachella Valley, and altitude wide from the Colorado River. He was appointed by Supervisor John Moy. Ms. Jan Zaparlo is on the end of the table out here. She is the 5th district, and that's Moreno Valley, and the pass area, including Banning and Beaumont. She was appointed by Supervisor Marion Asher. Last but not least is Ms. Desiree Bowie. She's our Planning and Condition Secretary, and she will be hopefully organizing the request to speak service. Let me talk a little bit about this hearing process. The way we intend it to go is, first of all, there will be a staff report. It will be presented by Mr. David Jones, who's sitting down here in front of us. He is the Chief County Geologist, and there is no time limit on his presentation. After that, there will be ex parte disclosures by members of the Planning Commission. And for those of you who are interested in ex parte means disclosures of meetings or telephone calls that occurred outside the planning hearing that we're having today. Following that will be opening testimony by the applicant, and I think most of you know that in this case it's granite construction. We will be allowed to ask questions of the applicant if we so desire. There's no time limit on that either. And we've agonized over this for quite some time. In order to be fair to the opponents and the proponents, we're going to allocate a 2-hour block to each. I want to stress another thing, that is that not everyone's going to be able to testify tonight. There's enough people here to count the speaker slips, but I doubt that we're going to make it. Also, if you want to stay home and watch it, it's streaming live on the County of Riverside page and the Planning Department page, and you click on the recorded video. The second hearing will be held at this venue on May the 3rd, at which time folks that do not get an opportunity to speak tonight will be allowed to speak. It's quite possible that this will go beyond 2 hearings, and if so, it's not clear at this time. We will hold the additional hearings in this room or in somewhere, some other venue. I've already indicated, I think, that there's 2 minutes per individual, and 4 people can donate their time, so you can have up to 10 minutes for one individual. There is an alarm somewhere here, right out there on the speaker podium, and that has a red, amber, and green lights on it. The green light will start when your time starts and you begin to speak, and the red light indicates that it's time for you to conclude your speaking. I'm going to be fairly strict on that. There's a lot of people who want to speak, and we want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity. We have 3 on-deck chairs down here that say next speaker on. I will be calling, at least 4 names at a time. So the first name will be the speaker. The next 3 names will take these chairs down here, so we have people wandering in from the back of the audience to speak. It should speed things up a little bit. The schedule tonight is 4 to 6, county staff geologist report, and ex parte discussions by the Planning Commission and the applicant's presentation. We believe that should take us up to 6 o'clock, and between 6 and 7 there's a dinner recess. From 7 to 9 we're allowing opposing testimonies, and we will give maybe some reference to elected officials so they go back to their official duties. From 9 to 11 we'll have supporting testimony, again with any elected officials that are here. And 11, or as soon as possible thereafter, we plan to close the public hearing. Not close the hearing, but continue the hearing to be heard. The next couple of things that I am going to speak to, I want you to pay close attention to. This is a public hearing. It's generally emotional and very controversial. It's being held in this venue so that your local residents, and as many as can, will be able to attend. The Planning Commission expects everyone to show the same courtesy and respect as if it were being held in our boardroom at the County Administrative Center. Now, I appreciate the clapping earlier, but this is not a sporting event. It's a public hearing. It's not a venue for demonstrations. We have had meetings in which we get cheers, hisses, boos, and similar outbursts that disrupt the hearing process. I want to stress that there's two sides to this particular issue, and both deserve to be heard without any disruption. If you feel like you agree with the speaker, you nod your head, but don't say anything. And if you don't agree, nod your head from side to side. That's fine. Okay, but don't disagree. You may not agree with the speaker, but provide them with the same courtesy and attention that you would if you were speaking up here. And last but not least, you probably noticed that there are some uniformed sheriff deputies in the area. I'm sure I won't need to call upon them, but if necessary, and we do have disruption of the hearing process, I will ask the speaker if they're going over their time or if we've got some outbursts of some kind, I will ask the sheriff deputies to escort you to the outside of the hearing room. That's all that I have for now. I think we'll begin the hearing process. We have a staff report. That's David Jones, the Riverside County Geologist, who is in front of the stand here.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners, David Jones, County Geologist.
Before we start the presentation by the county, can we have any ex parte communications by the Planning Commission members?
Okay, that's a little bit out of order that I have, but that's all right. We can do that. I personally have an ex parte, and I will make that now. This meeting occurred on April the 11th. It involved Matt Ryan, the Director of Outreach and Development for San Diego State University, and Paul Macario, the Cultural Coordinator of the Channing Tribe. Commissioner Petty and I rode with them through the Santa Margarita ecological area and found it to be quite interesting. We met at the City Hall. We entered the ecological area and discussed some of the experiments such as weather monitoring stations and a native eucalyptus grove that was apparently planted sometime in the past by University of California, Riverside. We drove then down to the field station above the Santa Margarita River and observed the weather station there and the canyon and river below. A small waterfall was observed flowing into the river and canyon on the south side of the canyon. Matt Ron then described an agreement with the Ventura California Water District to replenish water that had been taken out prior to the canyon. And said there was an agreement to put in somewhere probably between 3 and 4 cubic feet per second. When we reached the bottom of the canyon, we indicated that there was probably more than 3 to 4 cubic feet per second. It was in the nature probably 5 to 7, indicating that some of this water was coming from the hillside on both sides of the canyon. Paul Macario at that time described the canyon in terms of the chamber of tribal beliefs. I presume we'll hear some of that sometime later. He then proceeded up the south side of the canyon and stopped briefly at the stream that created the waterfall flowing into the Santa Margarita. We then drove to a meadow area containing a seismic experiment. And Matt Lon then explained that San Diego State University was not only concerned with the existing experiments that were in the canyon, but those which may be possible in the future if the quarry did not exhibit some features that future experimenters might be concerned about. We then drove through the Rainbow community and returned to Temecula City Hall. Total elapsed time on this particular mission was 2 hours, and it was an interesting trip. Gave us a little bit more foresight, I think, into the San Diego State projects, and that's the extent of my ex parte discussion. Mr. Snell, we'll start with you.
On November 17th of last year, I went on a site visit with Matt Strait and David Jones of our county staff, along with Commissioner Zapargo. We walked, I believe, along the west edge through about past halfway through the site. Stopped at various vantage points, looked down on the potential site. I think we were there for about an hour. On March 4th of this year, Gary Johnson provided me resolutions from the City of Eastvale and also a letter from the Foxstone Homeowners Association of Palm Desert, both in support. And on March 11th, Gary Johnson inquired about meeting with me and Commissioner Zapargo, which I declined to have that meeting. That's all I have.
Commissioner Petty?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also remind you that you and I toured the Quarry site with Mr. Johnson back after the scoping session. Even though the scoping session was a publicly noticed meeting, our tour back in August of 2005 was not. So I think that does qualify as an item to be mentioned in our ex parte disclosures. You mentioned that you and I, on April 11th, joined the Reserve Director Matt Ron and Changa Tribal Cultural Head Paul Macaro, and I agree with your assessment and your description of that tour of the San Diego State Reserve. And then approximately 6 months ago, Commissioner Forrest and I did go on another Liberty Quarry tour with David Jones from our staff, as well as Liberty Quarry personnel, including Gary Johnson. And we generally looked at the footprint of the quarry, the proposed quarry, and talked about things mentioned in the staff report. Just with a general information tour, lasted approximately 1 hour. And that does it for my ex partes.
Mr. Forrest, you have anything?
Yes, just in concurrence with Commissioner Petty's assessment of our traversing the footprint of the site. About 6 months ago, we spent about an hour and a half with Gary Johnson, staff, county geologist, just generally looking at the site. And that was the only time outside of the workshop that we had in 2005.
Commissioner Zapargo?
On November 17th, I had a site visit with David Jones and Matt Strait and Commissioner Snell. My ex parte is generally the same as Commissioner Snell. And on March 11th, I also declined a meeting with the applicant.
Okay. That concludes the ex parte discussions. Now I have a staff report. Mr. Jones?
Agenda item 3.1 is surface mining permit 213, EAR 475.
I can't hear you very well, so I don't know how the people in the back are doing. Can you hear me? No. Okay, thank you. I think you got the message.
and noise ordinance exception number 2. The site is located south of Temecula, west of I-15, and just north of the San Diego County line. The site is designated rural mountainous and is surrounded by open space conservation, multiple rural use, and light industrial. The site is zoned rural residential. The proposed project intends to change a 110-acre portion of the site to mineral resources and related manufacturing. The site is currently surrounded by rural residential, the city of Temecula, and San Diego County. The current land use at the site is vacant. The surrounding land use is mostly vacant, with the Santa Margarita Ecological Reserve to the west and north, I-15, some residences and businesses to the east, and scattered residential to the west and south. The project as proposed is a hard rock mine on 414 acres with a 155-acre quarry footprint and 30 acres of processing, including 2 asphalt batch plants, 1 concrete batch plant, and 1 recycling facility for asphalt and concrete. The project will utilize drill and blast mining techniques to produce a maximum of 270 million cubic yards of aggregate over the life of the project at a maximum rate of 5 million cubic yards per year. Now, based on the EIR, staff is recommending a reduced quarry size in response to mitigation required for acoustic, cultural, and aesthetic impacts. The quarry will be set back 400 feet from the north, and no settlement pond will be constructed. And the project will be required to conserve 250 acres as open space. The EIR concluded most impacts to be less than significant or less than significant with mitigation. However, the EIR also concluded 6 significant and unavoidable impacts in 4 areas of air quality, traffic, biology, and utilities. I'll go over these impacts individually. Our transportation department also has a brief presentation on traffic impacts that will follow my presentation. The EIR concluded relative to air quality direct impacts that several construction-related and operations-related pollutants relative to diesel emissions and dust will remain above respective thresholds. The construction-related impacts are anticipated to be temporary. The operation-related impacts represent ambient air incremental increases in these pollutants and remain significant and unavoidable. It should be noted that no federal or state ambient air quality standards were exceeded after mitigation, and the EIR concluded the project will not have a significant impact on human health. The EIR concluded...
Hold it. None of it.
Relative to cumulative air quality, the EIR concluded that the project is anticipated to generate CO2 equivalent concentrations of up to 80,000 tons per year. Now, any new source of pollution that contributes to a cumulative exceedance of emissions is significant. The project's CO2 emissions, however, equate to less than 0.02% of the state's overall emissions. For traffic, direct and cumulative impacts, the EIR concluded that all traffic-related impacts were less than significant with mitigation and technically feasible to implement. However, Riverside County cannot ensure the mitigation will be put in place, as many of the required mitigation improvements are under the jurisdiction of Caltrans, San Diego County, and the city of Temecula. And again, our transportation department has a brief presentation to follow. Relative to cumulative biological impacts, the EIR concluded that the Santa Ana-Palomar linkage Santa Ana Palomar Mountain linkage, just shown in the black lines, is currently impaired by I-15 and other development along Old Highway 395. Now, the county's multiple species habitat conservation plan recognizes this linkage by incorporating this special linkage area we call the SLA, shown in the blue box above. The special linkage area is not a criteria area and has no special requirements other than requiring secret level analysis, which the EIR provided. The proposed project represents approximately 6% of this SLA area, and on a north to south basis, it represents 14% of the Santa Ana Palomar Mountain linkage. Now, this makes the impact from the proposed project cumulatively significant for wildlife movement. For cumulative utilities, based on the EAR and the Western Municipal Water District's water supply assessment, there is a sufficient water supply for the project. And it should be noted that the Western Municipal Water District is requiring the project to use non-potable water for their processing. However, due to the uncertainty of the state's ability to supply water in the future, the project's water supply impacts are considered cumulatively significant. Now, I've just gone over the 6 identified areas that were significant and avoidable in some detail. However, we wanted to also go over the most frequent additional concern raised by the public during the CEQA review process. And we could present quite a bit and take up quite a bit of time on each of these issues, and we in no way mean to minimize concerns of the public, but in the interest of time, we'll merely present this list to the Commission. And it should be also noted that these items were found to be less than significant or less than significant mitigation in the EIR. Now, the most frequent concerns by the public were relative to air impacts and traffic impacts. And the other most frequent concerns included concerns about blasting impacts, impacts to the Santa Margarita Ecological Reserve, impacts to cultural resources, potential for rock falls, impacts to water quality, aesthetics, and there were also questions about the project alternatives that were run through in the EIR. Now, some of the project benefits. The mine would provide a portion of the demand for high-quality aggregate in the area, and it would be produced from a state-classified significant economic mineral resource. The mine is also close to major freeways, yet it will not be visible from large population areas, and it's expected to generate local jobs. In addition, although the EIR did not allow credit for truck trip reduction, it is anticipated that the project will ultimately result in shorter hauls, and it should also ultimately result in lower aggregate costs. Now, earlier this afternoon, we provided the Planning Commission a memo that contains all of the emails and letters that staff received after the distribution of our staff report and up to 9 a.m. this morning. I understand we received some other communications, and we will certainly provide that to the Commission as appropriate. In summary, keep in mind staff's recommendations are based on the EIR's conclusion of a reduced quarry footprint. Staff recommends tentative certification of the Environmental Impact Report number 475 based on the findings incorporated in the staff report and subject to resolution adoption by the Planning Commission certifying the Environmental Impact Report, and tentative approval of change of zone 7508, amending the zoning classification for 110 acres of the subject property from rural residential to mineral resources and related manufacturing in accordance with Exhibit number 3, based upon the findings and conclusions incorporated in the staff report. And tentative approval of noise ordinance exception number 2 as per section 7 of ordinance number 847, requesting exception to sections 4 and 6, general sound level standards and special sound sources standards, based upon the findings and conclusions incorporated in the staff report. And tentative approval of surface mining permit number 213 with the reduced footprint as modified by the EIR and the conditions of approval, subject to the attached conditions of approval, and based upon the findings and conclusions incorporated in the staff report. This concludes planning staff's presentation, and now I'll turn it over to our transportation department.
Good afternoon, Chairman Roth, members of the Planning Commission, Farah Korashadi from Transportation Department. Our presentation is brief due to the time constraint. Project consultant presents summary of the traffic study. Transportation staff present the mitigation measure based on the finding of the traffic study and the comments from the other agencies. And at the end, project consultant present traffic simulation at the intersection of the 15 and Rainbow Valley Boulevard after the proposed improvements are in place. Carlton?
Thank you. I'm Carlton Waters from Urban Crossroads, and we prepared the traffic study for the county on this project. As you've all heard, this is a quarry project located to the north of Rainbow Valley Boulevard and west of I-15. The maximum production of 5 million tons per year for this project are expected to generate a total of 4,200 passenger car equivalent trips per day. That takes into account the fact that a truck requires more roadway capacity than does a passenger vehicle, and so that's what we accounted for in the study. Next slide, please. Thank you. This slide demonstrates or depicts the location of regional quarries under existing or 2011 conditions, as well as those quarries that are anticipated to still be active in 2030. As you can see, this quarry is located in an area where there are very few active quarries today and even fewer expected in the future, which is why under current conditions, a lot of material is being imported down the 15 freeway corridor all the way into northern San Diego County. Next slide, please. For purposes of this project, a study area was established through consultation with county staff. It did include 3 interchanges in the county of Riverside: the Winchester Road interchange, the Rancho California Road interchange, and the SR 79 South interchange, as well as 3 interchanges in San Diego County: the Rainbow Valley Boulevard interchange, the Mission Road Old Highway 395 interchange, and the Palo Road State Route 76 interchange. All of these interchanges were studied, although the traffic contribution of the project for all of them, except for the Rainbow Valley Boulevard interchange, fall well below the county's traffic study guideline threshold of 50 peak hour trips. Next slide, please. The distribution of project traffic has been determined based on surrounding areas for both the truck trip traffic and then non-truck or employee trip distribution. Based on the existing utilization of materials in the vicinity of this project and the market area that's anticipated, approximately 30% of the truck traffic is expected to be oriented to and from the north. 65% of the truck traffic is expected to be oriented to and from the south. And then 5% or so is likely to be utilized locally and leave the vicinity of the project via Rainbow Valley Boulevard. In terms of employees, it's anticipated that approximately 90% of the employees would be traveling to and from the north and 10% to and from the south. Next slide, please. Based on the results of the analysis, which looked at a number of both interim year and a long-range horizon year scenario to establish the potential impacts of the project, there were a total of 11 intersections that were impacted by the project, as well as the roadway segment of Apollo Road between I-15 southbound and I-15 northbound, and then also the freeway segments of the I-15 freeway between State Route 79 South and Rainbow Valley Boulevard, and
and then between Rainbow Valley Boulevard and Mission Road. And mitigation measures have been developed for all of the intersections and roadway segments, which will be presented by Mr. Sang of county staff. The freeway segments have not been identified as locations where mitigation was possible. This is consistent with the Riverside County 2003 General Plan Update, which identified the same situation. Kevin? Oh, I'm sorry, I have one more slide. This slide, by the way, just illustrates the existing levels of service at the study area intersections. In many cases, the project has contributed a cumulative impact because there were existing deficiencies denoted by the red dots on the exhibit before you, before the project traffic was taken into consideration. And with that, I'll let you talk about mitigation. One more? I'm trying to hand this off a little too quickly, Carter. In terms of the potential truck trip reduction, it's important to understand that the materials needed to continue to construct new projects in this market area would occur regardless of whether this quarry is developed or not. The study indicates that there are currently 139,000 trips per day on the I-15 freeway corridor in the vicinity of the project, and 9,200 of those trips are truck trips based on Caltrans 2007 data. The Caltrans staff and Department of Conservation have identified the benefit of establishing more local aggregate sources and encouraging local quarries that would reduce the distance that aggregate is hauled. The truck counts that were conducted as part of this study effort for the county indicate that there is a significant transport of aggregate from north to south through Riverside County, from as far away as San Bernardino County. The analysis that's been completed indicates that in Lake Elsinore, we would reduce the number of trucks by 1,217 trucks per day. In Murrieta, the reduction would total approximately 1,000 trucks, 1,063 fewer trucks per day. And in Temecula, there would be 449 fewer trucks as a result of this quarry being developed. This reduction was not included in the analysis in the EIA.
Oh man, knock it off. Let the man continue. You don't have to agree with it. I told you, you can nod your heads. Let's not get the outburst. It slows everything down. Thank you.
So, although these reductions have been documented, the analysis in the traffic study did not actually take those reductions into account to make sure that we're doing a very conservative job of establishing what the potential project impacts are. When it's taken into account, there's a reduction of 16 million truck miles per year, all in Riverside County roadways. The project's impacts that were analyzed, as I mentioned, assumed that all of the project traffic was new traffic and did not take into account those diverted or reductions due to the material coming from other locations. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Senator.
Okay, before you start, if you can scrunch in or raise your hand if there's a seat beside you that's open. There's still people coming in, and over here on the right-hand side, it looks like we have some seating in there. So anybody that's got a seat, where somebody can sit that's coming in, sure would appreciate it if you let them know where it is. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Kevin Sang, Transportation Staff. I will be presenting the mitigation for the project. The project is conditioned to install traffic signals at the following locations. At northbound and southbound runners at I-15 and Rainbow Valley Boulevard. They will also be installing signals at Old Highway 395 and Rainbow Valley Boulevard, and also at southbound ramp of I-15 and Mission Road. At the I-15 Rainbow Valley Boulevard interchange, the project is conditioned to install one additional southbound off-ramp lane, one additional northbound off-ramp lane, a new lane and second truck scale located at the southbound CHP way station. They will also construct one northbound on-ramp auxiliary lane. At the time, production exceeds 3.5 million tons per year. Also, they will be installing a video camera at the southbound off-ramp lane per CHP request. Conditions after mitigation. At Rainbow Valley I-15 interchange, the level service will be the same or improved over existing conditions. For the 3 interchanges in Temecula, Granite will be paying fair share for the improvements. It will still remain cumulatively significant because the county does not have jurisdiction to require improvements. The analysis assumed the trucks from the project were new trucks when actually replaces the trucks present. The fees, I'm going to go over the fees. The fees that Granite will be paying plus ton will amount to $1,755,600. Their DIF obligation to Riverside County is $103,332. And tip fees that they will be paying to San Diego will be $1,365,448. Next slide.
I have a question.
Commissioner Snell. Commissioner Snell has a question.
Can we go back to the previous slide? I'm curious why there's DIF fees paid to San Diego County, but we can't do improvements for the city of Temecula. This isn't a sporting event. Can you answer the question? Could you repeat your question, please? I'm curious why the project has to pay fees to San Diego County. Separate, different jurisdiction than Riverside County. Yet we can't require them to do improvements in the city of Temecula.
From Transportation Department, they are paying fair share to 3 interchange in the Temecula. What we are saying is that we cannot improve at this point because the city of Temecula is the lead agency for those 3 interchange, but the Granite Construction are paying about $1.7 million toward the improvements of those 3 intersections.
If those intersections were on county property, is that the same way that we handle it, or would we handle it differently?
No, we will handle it the same because the interchange is, the cost of the interchange probably about $25 million or more, and it takes 5 to 10 years to design and construct an interchange.
Thank you.
Well, but the question is, what about San Diego? Am I reading tipping fees, or DIF fees, development impact fees, or?
The development impact fee will be paid to the county of Riverside. TIF fee will be paid to the county of San Diego.
Okay, this is something that I'm curious about. Who negotiated the tip fee, and why? What's the justification of the tip fee to San Diego?
Because there are some impact at the intersection in the San Diego County. To mitigate their fair share, they need to pay that.
So was that negotiated with the county of San Diego?
We placed that condition and with consultation with the San Diego County.
All right, so who in San Diego County determined that fee?
That's, I have to, I don't know the name, but I can find out for you.
Is it on a per ton basis, or is it a lump sum basis?
It's based on their fair share of the traffic.
All right.
All right, please continue.
This next slide just shows the existing physical improvements located at Rainbow Valley and I-15. Next slide. And this slide shows an overlay of the improvements that will be done at the same location. Highlighted in yellow is the improvements that Granite will be improving. Also note the signals are denoted by the green and black circular symbols. I'm going to turn it back over to Carlton for the simulation.
And as the final slide for traffic, well, there was a simulation prepared for the Rainbow Valley Boulevard interchange area showing cumulative conditions with the quarry operational and with the improvements that the project will be required to construct at all of the 4 intersections. I actually 5 intersections located along this stretch in place. Starting at the far west end, you can see that they will be constructing a separate lane allowing access to the truck scales to ensure that the trucks that are leaving the site do not impact the operations of the southbound ramp complex and scale access that's out there currently today. Moving over to that southbound off-ramp, if you look, you can see that the project will be constructing a separate right turn lane, again, so that their trucks are separated from the traffic that is out there today. Will not affect either of the vehicles that are queued up to access the scale, nor will they impact the left-hand turn lane that provides access for the residents of the Rainbow Valley area located to the east of the freeway. And similarly, over on the northbound ramps, they will be providing an additional off-ramp lane such that the left turns are separate from the through and the right turn movement to ensure that the trucks don't affect the movement of folks headed towards the east there, along with providing the additional northbound on-ramp, and then also a signal at Highway 395 and Rainbow Valley Boulevard. Again, referring to a previous slide, the only intersection that was identified as impacted by the project traffic were northbound off and on-ramp intersection. All the rest of these improvements are simply intended to make sure that the project fully mitigates its impact here at the interchange and will be providing access. And that concludes the traffic presentation.
Mr. Jones, is there additional testimony on this from staff?
No, sir, not at this time.
So that concludes the staff report.
Yes, sir.
All right, staff report being concluded. Are there any questions? Any commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I think if I may, I think it's important to let the audience know that even though staff is recommending approval of this project, we as an independent planning commission frequently, I shouldn't say frequently, but more often than a lot of people may realize, I hate to say that we go against staff, but find differently than staff, so I don't think it should necessarily be anything into the fact that, please, the chairman is about to lose his patience, I think. That's not helping.
Well,
So I think
we will take a recess if people, can't, just contain yourself. I know it's difficult to sit out there. It's difficult for us to sit up here and listen to it all too, but it's part of the process. So please try to restrain yourselves.
Anyway, I thought we should make that comment. Also, I think it's important for people to know that the commission is we're not county employees. We're appointed. We have other lives, other jobs. And we're appointed for a term, unlike a lot of jurisdictions all over the state of California. We're not appointed at will. We're appointed for a term. So it gives you some sense of the independence of this commission.
Commissioner Snell?
Yes.
No, support.
I have a question of staff. We just received today from South Coast Air Quality Management District a review of the final environmental impact report for the proposed report project. And they have 3 recommendations to be incorporated into EIR regarding clean truck fleet mitigation, on-site power generation, and air monitoring. Have these points been under discussion previous to the submission of this letter today?
We've had a chance to review that.
Okay.
So we have no responses. Okay. No other questions from the commission. We're going to proceed then with the applicant's presentation. That will be Gary Johnson.
allowing this hearing and the next hearing to be here at the wonderful facility. My name is Gary Johnson. I'm with Granite Construction Company. And today I'd like to talk to you about some problems that are facing the county, and then talk to you about some myths versus facts regarding this project. Get into talking about the aggregate need and demand, why this is an ideal site for a quarry, the reduction in truck traffic through the county, and air emissions that would result from approval of this project. Comparison of the truck traffic and the air emissions with some other land uses that we're familiar with in the area. We'll talk briefly about the economy, but then have Dr. John Husey come up and talk in more detail about that. And then talk a little bit about the process, both the environmental process and the outreach process that Granite has gone through in the last 6 years. And then we'll wrap it up with conclusions. After Dr. Husey, then we will have Mark Harrison with Deborah Brock Harrison, our land use and mining attorney. So here we are, Riverside County are facing a number of challenges. Unemployment is high. We all know people that are out of work. We drive our neighborhoods and we see for sale signs. We see foreclosure signs. We read about it in the paper constantly. It's always on the news. We're in a deep economic recession. Diesel emissions are a major cause of air quality problems. In South Coast Air District, we'll tell you that. CARB will tell you that. EPA are constantly trying to get the states, the counties, the communities, and the private companies like Granite to reduce our diesel air emissions. We're running out of aggregate. The Department of Conservation has said that we have less than 17 years of supply left, and that was 5 years ago. This has been discussed in the EIR in great detail, and the fact is we have to cite more local aggregate sources. Each day we have thousands of trucks that travel across our county to various corners of the county hauling aggregate, hauling asphalt, hauling concrete, hauling the same stuff completely through the county, from Los Angeles County to San Diego County. We're getting the brunt of all the impacts and none of the benefits. That's why Liberty Quarry is ideally situated to meet these challenges. It really is an ideal site. And what I'd like to talk about now are some of the myths that you may have heard or you may hear, and contrast that with some of the facts that are in the EIR about this project. It really appears to be a tale of two different projects. One that some of the opposition would have you believe and want you to believe, versus the project that was studied in detail in the EIR. You've heard we don't need it, not here, it's overlooking Temecula, destroy the quality of life, destroy our air, and add trucks to crowded roads. When in fact, the EIR shows it meets a critical need. It's an ideal location. It is zoned for mining and has been since before the city of Temecula incorporated. It's hidden from view behind the ridge lines. You won't know it's there because you won't be able to see it, hear it, or feel it.
This isn't helping your cause at all. Let the man speak.
The EIR and the traffic consultant talked about the net benefit to regional air quality because of the reduction in trucks. It eliminates 16.5 million truck miles per year, and the EIR properly concluded that there's no health risk to residents or workers from this project. We've heard other claims that it's in Temecula or looms over the city, when in fact the project is 3.3 miles from Temecula City Hall. It's hidden behind a ridge line that's as tall as the Sears Tower in Chicago, 1,400 feet above Old Town, 3.3 miles away. To see it, you would have to look over the Sears Tower, or you'd have to look 2.5 miles to a rock face and then a half mile through that rock. We've heard it's too large. We've heard there's better places. We'll destroy our health. We'll ruin our air. In fact, it's only 135 acres, about the size of the Promenade Mall area. And let me put that into perspective, because the whole 135 acres is not operational at one time. We will start off by paving about a 30-acre area, that includes all the processing equipment, includes our office, includes the scale house, includes the water tank. And then we will start mining to the north. At any given day that we're mining over the life of the project, we're operating in a 5 to 6 acre area. So we're never disturbing and active at 135 acres at one time. And we revegetate as we continue to mine. 25 different alternatives were studied in this project. The health risk experts, the epidemiologists, South Coast Air District, the EIR, all concluded there's no potential for health risk to any workers or residents in the area. There's actually a net benefit to air quality from the project. Let's talk about the size of the project. We've heard it's the largest in the world, it's the largest in the U.S., but in fact it is, it's not even the largest in Riverside County. The largest active mine in the U.S. is a 2,000 acre mine in Utah. This project, when we complete mining, will be 7% that size. There's 24 larger quarries in Southern California, 8 of them in Riverside County. The largest being our Indio facility that we've operated for many years will ultimately be 700 acres. And many people have gone out there to tour that facility and seen that we can operate a very large area that's disturbed without impacting neighborhoods nearby. Let's talk about the location. We've heard it's not zoned for mining, but we know it is. So we didn't look elsewhere, didn't look seriously, it's a bad site, and it's not needed. It has been zoned for mining. You may recognize this house as a Temecula Quarry house situated off the golf course off I-15. This area has been mined since the 1800s. Aggregate and rock were loaded on trains and shipped by rail through the Santa Margarita River Gorge, through what's now the Ecological Reserve, and then shipped all over the state for construction. It's an ideal site for mining because it's very high quality rock. And up on the dais, there's samples of rock from the core holes that give you an indication of how intact this bedrock is. The county looked extensively at other alternatives. 25 other sites were considered in the EIR. 4 alternatives examined in depth, including the one that the EIR found to be the environmentally superior alternative, that of the reduced footprint. It's an ideal site with its high quality rock. It's adjacent to I-15, so we don't have to go through schools and neighborhoods to get to the freeway. It's hidden from view from the residents of Temecula, and it is currently zoned for mining, and it satisfies a critical long-term need. Let's talk about the need. We've heard there's no shortage of aggregates, or we have enough quarries in Riverside County, or the project is only for San Diego. None of that is true. The Department of Conservation very clearly showed in their report 5 years ago that western Riverside County only has 17 years of research left. 13 quarries in Riverside County are going to close before 2030. Now that may sound like a long time, it's 19 years from now. We opened up a quarry in San Diego County, a greenfield project, 3 years ago. It took 23 years to permit and open that site. It's a long process. You can't wait till the last minute. You've got to start now. Liberty Quarry could meet 40% of the demand for all of western Riverside County for the next 75 years. Every city consumes aggregate, either on public works projects or private works projects. The city of Murrieta and Temecula combined consume about 1.5 million tons per year. These cities were largely built in the last 20 years and probably consumed close to 20 million tons total during that time period. Most of that aggregate came from San Diego County or came from up in the Corona area. It didn't come locally. Talk about health. We've heard that you'll see huge dust clouds coming over the horizon. That silica will be released and cause respiratory illnesses. Our health is at risk. When in fact, the maximum increase of PM10 in the city of Temecula from the project is less than 1% of current levels. The silica impact, as detailed in the EIR in section 3.2, is 214 times lower than the safety threshold established by the state of California at the project boundary. And as you get further from the project boundary, as you move a mile and 2 miles and 3 miles and 5 miles away, that level drops off drastically. There is no unsafe health risk. Now, I want to go back to the crystalline silica. There's 214 dots on this slide. The one red dot represents the consultants and the EIR's estimation of the crystalline silica level at the project boundary. Not in Temecula, at the project boundary. Now, we've heard that the consultants may have made a mistake, or the EIR is wrong, or it was biased. Let's say they were off by a factor of 2. That's what the crystalline silica level is. Now it's only 107 times less than the standard. Maybe they made a mistake by a factor of 10. Now we're only 21 times less than the standard. Maybe they completely blew it, and they're off by a factor of 214. Not likely. Considering the scrutiny of the EIR, somebody would have pointed out where they made a mistake. But even that level is considered by the state a level that's still safe. But here's where we are. And it's at the project boundary. There really is no health risk of crystalline silica on this project. Now, we've heard doctors fear health risks through the proposed project. The Riverside County Medical Association confirmed no health risk in a letter to the county in which they stated the proposed project does not pose a health risk to workers or residents in the region. RCMA represents over 900 physicians. Let's talk about the impacts a little bit, how they're defined. Significant and unavoidable. We hear this all the time. It's been brought up earlier by staff. It will be brought up later tonight. We've heard that alone should stop the project from going forward. When in fact, that term is a legal definition, and it's required by findings for many projects that you're familiar with that have been approved in the area. Matter of fact, my CEQA attorney pointed out that if you have a project of any size at all in the state of California, and there's not a finding of significant and unavoidable, then the EIR is probably flawed. And for this project, there was a finding of that. But the staff went much further than just looking at those planning levels, those emission levels. They looked at specific impacts of noise, air, vibration, light on specific receptors near the project, in Rainbow, in Fallbrook, in SCBR, in the city of Temecula. So the public and the commissioners have a chance to go in and open that document up and look at the increase at a certain receptor. You'll notice one of these projects that was considered significant and unavoidable was the proposed annexation of our property by the city of Temecula. Talk a little bit about air quality. We've heard uncontrolled dust, air quality will be ruined, thousands of trucks on the road. The diesel trucks will cause increased air pollution. When you look at the plant, and a lot of people have been out to our EDO facility and they've seen that plant, and people tell us, I don't see dust, it's not noisy. That's an antiquated plant. The new plants are enclosed. This is what the plant, what part of the plant at Liberty Quarry will look like. Excuse me. That's a screening tower where aggregate is screened. There's really only 3 pieces of movable equipment on site that are moving aggregate. There's a large shovel, there's 2 large trucks. They move the material to a jaw crusher, it's dumped in that jaw crusher, and from that point forward, it's enclosed in a building like this or in under a conveyor, moving from building to building to be crushed and screened, put into loadout facilities and automatically loaded out into trucks. This is a bag house. There'll be 3 or 4 bag houses on site that pull air off the enclosed buildings and filter the air. This is why the emissions from this site are so small. It actually benefits air quality. When you remove 16 million truck miles of diesel trucks per year on county roads, going through Corona, going through Hemet, going through Bandy, going through Riverside, going through Murrieta and Temecula, you're going to reduce regional air emissions. The Clean Truck program that we worked out with South Coast Air Quality Management District is the first of its kind. We will be required in sort of operation to outfit 130 on-road diesel trucks with new engines or diesel particulate filters. Barry Wallerstein made it very clear the first time we met with him. I understand you're going to reduce the truck trips. I get that. But you can't use that as mitigation. I want to see some real mitigation. I want you to step up and do something that's never been done. And this is what we worked out with South Coast Air District. I'd like to talk about the reserve. And the reserve is situated to the west and to the north. We approached the people at the reserve before we submitted the application, just like we did the city of Temecula. We've heard that we're going to pollute the river that runs through the reserve. We've heard that the bottom of the quarry is below the depth of the river, about 300 feet. None of that's true. We will not discharge anything from the mining area off the site. The bottom of the quarry pit is actually 180 feet higher than the river. This cross-section, there's 3 things I think you should take away from this cross-section. First is the vertical distance between the bottom of the quarry and the river, which is 180 feet. The next is the distance from the quarry to the river at the closest point, which is 1.5 miles. And the third thing is the geology underneath the quarry is solid bedrock, and there is no aquifer there. We've heard the project will trigger an earthquake, when in fact the San Diego State University professor, the same school that owns the ecological reserve, found there's absolutely no chance that the quarry will trigger a seismic event. And that's in the EIR. We've heard the project will destroy research potential that's in the EIR. Your staff went through extraordinary means to look at the potential impacts to the reserve. They sent out a survey to people that had done research or were doing research. They got survey information back. They looked at the research they were doing. They quantified what potential impacts could occur to that research that would hurt that research. And they did that for every one of those projects. And then they looked at the potential impacts of noise, air, light, vibration on the border of the reserve and the quarry. And what they find? Quantitatively, it's all less than significant. There's never a decibel increase of noise greater than 5 decibels. The vibration levels are less than 10% of something considered significant. There's no light that is still on the reserve. And the air emissions in the reserve are increased less than 2% above ambient.
Mr. Johnson, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
In the literature and our staff report, it's indicated that there are 70 existing projects on the reserve. Is only 4 of them that say there's no impact?
There were 4 letters that are in the final EIR from researchers that have either done research at the reserve or doing research or looking at doing research at the reserve.
Do you recall what projects they might be?
One of them was a weather station. One of them was a plate tectonics project. One of them had to do with fire sensors. And I'm sorry, offhand, I can't recall the other one, but I can get it.
All right. It just seems to be a small percentage of them that are not concerned with the board.
Well, I don't think there was a researcher doing work in the ecological reserve that submitted a comment letter on the EIR saying they were concerned.
Okay, go ahead.
heard that the project will destroy tourism in the wine country. And in fact, the visitors to Temecula, they won't see the project, they won't hear it, otherwise they won't know it's there. Again, the EIR shows potential for noise, vibration, visual, and light impacts that are imperceptible. The tourism and wine country flourish in other areas with presence of large quarries like Napa and Palm Springs. And I've got a report that I'd like to submit for the record. I've got a copy for each of you, and we'll be glad to answer questions about it next week, that looked at the potential for impacts to tourism for this project and found that they were non-existent. We've heard air quality will be destroyed and it will destroy tourism, yet in the Temecula proper area, quantified increase in air emissions is less than 1% above ambient. Far less impact than other uses in our city that we're familiar with. This chart shows Liberty Quarry emissions on the left, emissions from Red Hawk, a shopping mall, a discount store, a home improvement store, and I-15 through Temecula are also shown there. All of those land uses exist right now in the city of Temecula. The Quarry project is located 6 miles from wine country. It's not likely that the quarry could impact the wine country or tourism if all these other land uses do not impact it. So the bottom line for this is facts really do matter. The EIR concluded we're better off with Liberty Quarry than without it. It meets a critical need. It's an ideal location. It takes trucks off the road. It improves air quality. And it creates new jobs. So let's talk about what is aggregate. Why do we need it? Aggregate is the basic building block of everything we build. From this church, to the streets outside, to the wineries and the buildings and roads in the wineries. It builds our infrastructure. It sustains our economy. And if you have a local source, it helps keep our quality of life. We use it for homes, we use it for roads, we use it for schools and hospitals. We use on average, according to the Department of Conservation, 7 tons of aggregate per year per person. 43% of all aggregate goes into public works construction. Riverside County has stated that we're going to grow the population of this county about 1.3 million people per year, 1.3 million people by 2035. A 58% increase. At 1.3 million people, additional citizens in this county are going to require an additional 9 million tons of aggregate every year. Where's it going to come from? We're going to run out of sources. We can continue to import it from longer and longer distances, putting more trucks on the freeway, more air emissions in the air, more damage to the roads, more traffic, and higher construction costs. Or we can site more local aggregate facilities like Liberty Quarry. This diagram is taken from the Department of Conservation. The circles represent production areas for aggregate. You'll notice that the Temecula Valley and San Diego County are 2 of the larger production areas. The circles represent 50-year demand projected by the Department of Conservation for that production area. For western Riverside County, its estimated demand for the next 50 years is 1.1 billion tons. For San Diego County, it's slightly more than that. The pie shape within the circle represents the permitted reserves today. So western Riverside County has less than 25% of the reserves the state says we need. San Diego County has less than 20% of reserves the state says we need. Liberty Quarry is located at the edge of both of those, right between them. Ideally situated to serve the southern portion of western Riverside County and the northern portion of San Diego County. This is out of the EIR. Western Riverside County is projected to run out of permanent reserves before 2030. And the need is increasing. We've got significant infrastructure needs over the next 20 years. Now, if county and the cities, if they quit approving residential development and quit decide, if they decide to quit building roads and quit building hospitals and quit building supermarkets, then we don't need any more aggregate and our roads will just fall apart. But we all know that's not going to happen. According to Forbes, we pay among the highest price to drive on the worst roads in the nation. We approved $36 billion in infrastructure bonds in 2006 to build roads, schools, and levees, all which require aggregate. That's a lot of money, and we don't have it. And if we spend money on these things, we want to spend it building it, not shipping aggregate across the county. So the answer to this dilemma is a local source of aggregate. Again, an ideal site with high-quality rock, close to demand, in the middle of a growth market, classified by the state as an important mineral resource and zoned for mining, with minimal impacts, adjacent to I-15, and with as a royalty payment to the state teachers' retirement system on the royalty.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough.
Mr. Chairman, you did ask a question during Mr. Johnson's presentation. This is the first I'm hearing the royalty payment. Can you enlighten me as to how that came about?
The minerals beneath the site are owned by the state of California. It's not an unusual situation. Our Indio site, a portion of the minerals are owned by the state of California. We have a project up in San Bernardino County, the minerals are owned by the state of California. So we have to negotiate a royalty agreement with the state and pay them a per ton fee for every ton we extract and process. Now, the state wrote a letter either to the city of Temecula or to LAFCO 2 years ago and stated that the royalties from this area to the state could approach hundreds of millions of dollars over the life of the project. We've submitted an application to the State Lands Commission to negotiate that royalty payment. Those negotiations are not complete yet.
So it'll be essentially it's a tipping fee on a per ton basis.
It'd be a royalty payment on a per ton basis. Yes, that's correct.
Go ahead.
So location and distance do matter.
Oh,
Sure.
Mr. Johnson. Commissioner Forrest.
Mr. Johnson,
Oh, I'm sorry.
please clarify again that royalty payment to the California Teachers Retirement.
That's correct.
Again, why specifically to?
The minerals beneath the site, and Mr. Porras, this goes back many years when the federal government gave the land to the state. They told the state they had to reserve the minerals for the state teachers' retirement system. So there's areas in the state, and basically it's section 16 lands and section 36 lands, where the minerals are owned by the state of California.
I think it's appropriate for me to make a disclosure. If the public didn't know, everybody here does. This is news to me, but I am a teacher.
Mr. Chairman, are we going to have a hearing where people can get respect when they talk on both sides? Or are we going to have a shouting match and a demonstration? Yeah, we're going to.
No, knock it off, or we're going to.
I expect everybody to get treated
We'll
with
recess
respect.
the hearing, and you can all go home. Listen, pay attention, We understand, and as I said before, we know it's confrontational, we know it's emotional, but allow people to speak. And Commissioner Porras, if he hadn't said it, I would have told you he's a teacher, so it makes him happy. I guess to find out something he didn't know tonight. So let's just get on with it.
I just thought I'd make it a matter of public record, put it out there right now. So anybody wants to discuss it. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Proceed.
So location and distance really do matter. The longer the distance, the greater the carbon footprint, the greater the cost. Caltrans has estimated that aggregate 15 cents per mile. And in some cases, transporting aggregates even 20 miles can double the cost. The cost of fuel obviously is going up. That adds to the problem. Longer distances equal negative impacts, and not just a few. Greenhouse gases, fuel consumption, road maintenance costs, air emissions, traffic congestion, and road construction costs. This gives you an idea of what's happening right now with the aggregate being trucked through this county. There's aggregate coming from Irwindale, Corona, Banning, Beaumont, Rialto. We have a quarry in Palm Springs. We've shipped aggregate through the San Jacinto Valley, through Murrieta, and Temecula, San Diego for county jobs. This puts unnecessary trucks on the road, causes unnecessary traffic, unnecessary air emissions. With Liberty Quarry situated on the county line, south of Temecula, a lot of that traffic can be avoided. We can reduce significantly the amount of traffic, as the Transportation Department pointed out, that travels through Riverside County. This is a lot more sustainable than what we're doing right now. The EIR pointed out that there will be 1,200 trucks per day on average removed. If the project is built out and operating at full capacity, removed from the freeways in Lake Elsinore, over 1,000 trucks per day in Murrieta, and over 400 trucks per day in Temecula. Less traffic, less road maintenance, cleaner air, reduced costs. Caltrans has pointed out that if transport distances were just reduced by an average of 15 minutes one way, there would be a 42% savings in material costs. Think how much further our tax dollars would go if we were able to do that. Reduce road wear and tear costs by $12 to $18 million. A fully loaded truck does a lot of damage. Some have suggested that it does damage to 7,000 cars on local roads. Now this photograph is from the city of Hemet. It's Warren Road. The lane in the foreground is a southbound lane. The lane in the background is a northbound lane. And you can drive this stretch of road 24/7 and you see trucks carrying aggregate down Warren Road, coming from Banning and Beaumont, and taking aggregate into Murrieta and Temecula and beyond. So the city of Hemet is straddled with the road maintenance costs and the additional trucks and the additional air emissions. Same thing happens in other cities, whether it's Moreno Valley or Corona or Lake Elsinore or Livermore or Menifee. Too many trucks on the road causing damage that's not necessary. I'd like to turn and talk a little bit about comparisons between the air emissions from the project and some of the truck and traffic issues. If you were to develop 83 homes on the same property, which is what the city of Temecula proposed doing when they tried to annex the project 2 years ago, you would have more net air emissions from the site than Liberty Quarry. Look at PM10 emissions on a daily basis, pounds per day. Liberty Quarry is on the right. All of these uses you're familiar with, I think most of them, or some of them, came through this planning commission. Those daily emissions are greater than Liberty Quarry after mitigation. Let's look at ADT, average daily trips. Now, Liberty Quarry, the trucks have been increased by a factor of 2.5 to account for the passenger car equivalent. All these other projects, all of which we know, have higher ADT than Liberty Quarry. In Liberty Quarry, that traffic is on the freeway. It's not in a city. Look at peak hour volumes, same thing. The traffic really is not that great compared to other land uses. The reduction in truck traffic in the freeways will reduce CO2, which is a major component of greenhouse gas, by 83%. The clean truck program that I mentioned, according to the studies done for that program, PM10 emissions will be reduced by 86%. NOx emissions will be reduced by 51%. Dr. John Husing is going to come up and talk a little bit later, right after me, about the economy and the jobs and the benefits. But just touching on them briefly, we will add jobs. They're high-paying jobs, indirect jobs, that bring new revenue to the county, whether it's sales tax or property tax. And yes, there will be money, a royalty paid to State Teachers Retirement Fund, which we read in the paper all the time, but the critically bad shape it's in. So let's talk about the process. We submitted an application in 2005 for the project. We amended it in 2007. A draft EIR came out in 2009, and the final came out 2 years later. And through this process, it's painful, it's time-consuming. Believe me, it's expensive. It's very expensive. But it makes for a better project. The result from the EIR is we need to reduce the footprint to 135 acres. We need to limit to 1 blast per day. Doesn't mean we'll blast every day, but we have a limit of 1 per day. We have to use non-potable water. There's a limit on a strict limit on how much water we can use. The hours of operation have been cut down. A clean truck program introduced. We have to do air monitoring. We have to do vibration monitoring, and I believe, and Dave, maybe you can correct me, I believe this is the only quarry in Riverside County that will be doing the type of air monitoring we'll be required to do. And we'll build an additional off-ramp lane at the Rainbow Valley Boulevard. So the process works in the sense that the analysis shows where stuff needs to be changed, where there needs to be additional mitigation. It allows the public to get involved. And while the county was going through all that, we were busy also. We went to the city of Temecula, we went to San Diego State, we went to Pechanga before we submitted our applications to the county. We met with homeowners, we met with residents, we met with as many people as we could in Temecula. We reached out to people all over the county to get their input, to tell them about the project. One of the greatest thing we're able to do is to talk people into getting on a bus and taking a full day and drive to our quarry in India and take the time to look at it. We took them right up to the working face. They could hear how noisy it is on the site. But when they got 500 yards away back our admin building and you hold up a decibel meter, it's 50 decibels. And what they saw was it wasn't dusty, it wasn't intrusive. There's 3,000 homes situated within 2 miles of the quarry. And we don't ever get complaints from those homeowners. They're building homes right now, right on our border. We did presentations. We did 9 town hall meetings. We set up in different locations in Temecula, in Murrieta, 3 times in Temecula, Murrieta, Corona, Hemet. We brought in our consultants, and we made the consultants available so members of the public could come in. They could go up to a consultant and ask them any question they wanted to about air. They could talk to them one-on-one for 3 hours. And we didn't get involved, we didn't get in between them. Let them ask the questions because these consultants are smart. They've done the analysis, they can explain it. Again, the tours, we continue to do these. We did one last week. We had numerous meetings with San Diego State. Matt, Ron, and I have talked numerous times. We probably disagree on a lot of things, but we did talk. We reached out to the city of Temecula. We continue to be open to meeting with them to discuss issues if they wish to discuss. We reached out to Pechanga, and I know the county staff has consulted with Pechanga. They're required to by law, and the county staff told me they would continue to meet with them if they need to, but they haven't consulted with them. We met with state and federal agencies. We had site visits, we had meetings in Carlsbad, we had meetings in Riverside, we had meetings in Temecula and Murrieta to talk about the habitat leakage. And through all this, we've built support. Broad support, a lot of support in Temecula, and you will hear from people tonight to support the project and why they support it, And I think the reason is they got the information, they got the facts, they didn't just listen to somebody say no. A very wise person told me a few weeks ago, you know, it's really easy just to say no and walk away and not try to get the information. That's the easiest thing we can do. I hear it from my neighbor, I just believe it and walk away. Thankfully, a lot of people took the time to get the information and read the EIR and know the site tours. We've built broad support across the county because it's a regional project that has regional benefits, both economic and environmental. And from that, the support comes in the form of resolutions and letters and testimony from chambers, from cities, from the Farm Bureau, from businesses, from AGC, from the labor unions. We're a union company, and we have damn good workers. From farmers, we built support for the project because people took the time to find out about it. And we continue to reach out, we continue to meet with people, we continue to give tours, and if somebody wants a tour this week, we'll do that. So in summary, the project is going to add jobs to the economy, it's going to result in cleaner air, it's going to result in less truck traffic. It's an ideal location for a number of reasons, all supported by the EIR. There's a definite need that the state has said is there and that your EIR says is there. So in the end, here's what we're asking for. We're asking you to certify an EIR that staff has spent 6 years putting together. It's an excellent EIR. It clearly shows that we're better off with the project than without the project. We're asking that you issue a land use permit for the project and a reclamation plan. Allow us to invest tens of millions of private dollars. We're not looking for a tax break. We're not looking for a handout. We've been doing business in the county, in the state for 89 years, and we will continue to do that. We want to help put people back to work. We want to satisfy a need that's clearly identified by the state. We want to reduce truck traffic and air emissions. And we want to provide a source that's more sustainable than what we're doing right now. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Dr. John Husing is here to come up and talk, and then our land use attorney would like to come up and talk.
Hold on, Commissioner Forrest.
Mr. Johnson, the same question that I asked of staff, and we didn't have a response regarding the South Coast Air Quality Management District letter that we received today. It sounds as if, with regards to the truck fleet and the air monitoring, that is being incorporated, but I don't know to the extent. And I was wondering if you have a comment on our power generation, or are you familiar with the letter?
I saw the letter briefly, Mr. Forrest. I've had a chance to look at it. We haven't looked at it in detail. I do know that they asked for a little bit different clean truck program. I know they asked for us to try to incorporate solar to the extent possible. And I think they asked to be involved with the air monitoring.
Yes, on the power generation, they are asking for the construction operation of a 14 megawatt natural gas fired power plant. Are you familiar with that?
Well, that's part of our proposal. What they're asking is, can we offset any of that power need by building solar panels on site? We have a very small site. We're only serving 135 acres. At our DDO facility, where we have 700 acres, we have an application pending for a 20 megawatt solar array. 20 megawatt solar array would take well over 100 acres of land. We obviously can't do that. But I think what they're referring to is putting solar panels on buildings, on offices, on parking structures that may be at the facility, to try to offset some of the emissions from the power plant.
Well, when you have time to go through that and see if you can go forward my point.
We'll look at it in more detail and be prepared to talk about it next week.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Bennett.
Well, obviously we'll have a lot of questions, but one of the things that I'd just like Mr. Johnson to be prepared to do is, I'm curious as to the slide you put up that said for every 15 miles you can reduce the cost by, I
think it was 42%. I'd be interested in the backup to that.
That came from Caltrans, so I'll get you their report that stated that.
I appreciate it.
Sure. Any other questions?
It looked to me like many of your comments and your slides at the bottom indicated that they came from Kleinfelder. Is that correct?
The air analysis was done by Kleinfelder. All of the reports that were included in the EIR reports went through Wilbur, who put the EIR together, and then your county staff that reviewed.
Did you fund Mr. Kleinfelder and Wilbur?
I'm sorry?
Did you fund Mr. Kleinfelder and Wilbur, the people who made the reports which you quote?
Absolutely. I tried to get away with not paying him, but they wouldn't have it.
Okay. I have been through the front end of the final EIR, which has a table in it. And I'm not going to take up the time of all these folks tonight, but what I'm going to do is I use a computer with a sticky note and have many questions on that table, which I will turn over to Mr. Strait and Mr. Jones, and you can get whatever comments that I have made off of that, and I would like some response to them sometime in the future. I want to get the public testimony first, you know. I've also been all the way through the staff report and everything from typos to missing words and anything else I could find in there. I have sticky noted the staff report also. Insofar as any of those comments may be relevant, you know, to you, I will rely on Mr. Jones and Mr. Strait, you know, to provide those to you. So I will turn my computer over to them after the hearing is over, and we'll see how that turns out. I'd like for you to take a good hard look at them, and if some of them are not applicable, you can say so. But those that are applicable, I'd appreciate a response. And it would be nice if it were in writing.
Okay, no problem. I'm glad to do that.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. Anything else?
No, I just want to see if we have any more questions.
Sure.
Nobody? No, we have no more questions for you.
And I'm the last Dr. Hughes to come up. I'm going to submit, I put there's a briefing book that we prepared. Each of you have a copy, and staff has a copy. I'm going to submit a copy of that on the record. We'll go in the administrative record. I'm also going to submit this impact analysis report on tourism for the record also. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, Mr. Houston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. I'm Dr. John Husin. I'm an economist. I prepared the economic analysis of the project, and I would just like to briefly talk a bit about what is in it. You have the analysis. It's essentially divided into 4 parts. The first part deals with regional policies. When you look at what it is that has caused this valley to be an extraordinary place to live, in part it's because of regional policies designed to create a high quality of living with schools, with shopping centers, detached single-family homes, etc. And I think the point has been made quite clearly already, so I won't labor it, that all of that requires aggregate. It requires a great deal of it. So a good deal of the demand that was in the work that I was doing is generated by the nature of policy decisions that are made to create the quality of life in the valley. I would like to talk a little bit about the 3 other parts. First is economic impact. When you think about a gold mining town in the Old West for a moment, you have money that comes into a place without an economy that supports the miners. The miners then in turn, again, if you're an old Clint Eastwood movie, they have needs. So they need, for instance, a general store. The same money that supports the miners supports the general store. Eliminate the miners, you eliminate the general store. They have a need, say, for entertainment, so you have generally a saloon. I'll stop the example at that point. But the fact is that any economy, you look at the economic What is bringing money into this region from the outside world? A project like Liberty Quarry fills that definition. It will be bringing in, when it starts, about $15.1 million a year from the outside world. And that's money, that includes money that only includes money, that comes from the outside world, that is in turn spent within Riverside County. So it's not including any money that comes from within the area, that doesn't include any money that is not spent within the county. So it's like that flow of money to the gold miners. When you look at the effect of that on the level of economic activity in the region, the total impact is $171.5 million worth of economic activity, or worth of the force that moves through an economy. When you look at household income that is generated, now this includes both what goes on at the quarry, but also generally in the economy. So the saloons and the general stores, that secondary impact, which is often much bigger than the money first coming as the money changes hands locally. Household income generated is at $18.7 million. At the quarry itself, there will be 99 jobs, paying between $80,000 and $100,000. Of all of the sectors that I study in my work in the state, the highest paying just happens to be mining. That depends whether it's aggregate mining or gold mining or special minerals that are out in the desert or whatever. It is the highest paying sector. In addition to that, another 178 jobs are created that have nothing to do with the mine. And that would be in the general economy. In fact, the people that have those jobs may not even know that they're being supported because that facility is here. When I was a child back in Alameda, California, there was a naval base, and one of the things the Navy used to do was pay the sailors when the fleet arrived in $2 bills. And the reason they did that was to show the town those secondary impacts, because when the fleet hit, there were $2 bills everywhere. Because when the sailors spent and then the money changed hands, you could see the effect of that impact. That's where that 178 jobs comes from. So the total is 277. Now, in the question of economic impact, a couple of issues have arisen. One of which is if you reduce all these truck trips that have been talked about, what about the loss of jobs that come about because of the truck drivers? The answer to that question is actually quite simple. If you look at the demand for truck drivers in Southern California, the demand is projected to far outstrip the supply. So those people who have jobs somewhere else, who drive through the area, will be working somewhere else, just not hauling aggregate. Because the demand for truck drivers, particularly now that the ports of LA and Long Beach have exploded handling import and export trade, there's more demand, as I say, than can be met already. One of the other issues that comes up, and I can just talk about my experience as the economic consultant, the Coachella Valley Economic Partnership. There are in the Coachella Valley a very large number of facilities, mining facilities today handling aggregate. I believe the number is 14. I see no impact at all on tourism in the Coachella Valley as a consequence of those facilities being there. I've never heard the issue raised, as a matter of fact, in the 12 or 15 years that I've been working down there. With regards to government revenues, property taxes would be roughly $650,000 to $660,000 a year. Sales taxes would start out at $103,000 and go up to $1 million when the facility reaches its capacity. Because of the half-cent sales tax, it would start at $51,000 going to RCTC and end at $513,000 in capacity, and then there's about $100,000 in toll fees. Finally, the last issue that arises is you heard the figure of reducing of about 16.5 million vehicle miles a year. When you value when you use Caltrans figures for what that costs in terms of road maintenance, there would be a savings of about $5.3 million each year because of not having those trucks driving those long distances. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Do we have any other speakers in? We're 10 minutes away from 7 o'clock, so please state your name. Let's see. Wait a minute, maybe I already have it. Hold on. Are you Mark Harrison?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, I'm Mark Harrison, and I think I'll fit in perfectly into the 10 minutes that are left. I'm Mining and Land Use Counsel for Granite Construction Company, and one of the things that I want to take the time to introduce you to tonight are the legal standards that affect this particular kind of land use. There's three. There's state mining laws and regulations. There's the local implementation of those laws. And then lastly, as you're all aware, there's the environmental review that takes place for a project like this. And I want to talk about each of those and talk about the way that, in my opinion, I believe those standards have been met in this case. First, the state mining law is known as SMARA, the Surface Mining and Reclamation Act. It was a law that was passed in 1975, and it's an important law because prior to the passage of SMARA, mining was regulated in the state as a complete hodgepodge. Every county or every city regulated mines differently. Some might require no permit, some might require a breaking permit, some might require a license. But what this law did is it created a uniform set of state rules for projects just like this. And here are the pieces. First, it classifies mineral deposits. The California State Geologist, now known as the California Geologic Survey, travels the state, and they identify the quality and quantity of rocks in various areas. And this site has received the highest designation, Mineral Resource Zone 2A, which means it's a significant and commercially viable deposit, commercial grade aggregate. Secondly, as a uniform standard, surface mine permits, sometimes known as conditional use permits in other jurisdictions, are required for all mines. Thirdly, and this is the first time this has been discussed a great deal tonight, something called a reclamation plan is required. Prior to SMARA's passage, no such beast existed in land use law, but a reclamation plan ensures that when mine's done, it will be left in a reclaimed state suitable for another use, in this case, open space. And lastly, it requires financial assurances, usually in the form of a bond or a letter of credit to ensure that reclamation takes place. And their annual inspections are required for all mines. But this law, although it occurs at the state level, is implemented locally. This county does it through a particular ordinance known as Ordinance 555. And here's the preamble to the ordinance. The Board of Supervisors hereby finds and declares that the extraction of minerals is essential to the economic well-being of the county of Riverside. But, of course, the ordinance goes on and it qualifies that support. It says, so long as that activity takes place pursuant to certain rigorous, defined standards. And here's what those standards include. Of course, a mining permit to be reviewed by this commission and then is on appeal by the board. That allows for public participation. Secondly, it allows the vehicle for all other land use standards, zoning ordinances, general plan policies to be brought to bear on mining use. Thirdly, it requires compliance with very specific and tailor-made standards for mining uses. In this case, mine facing, how will the mine proceed, operational design, concurrent extraction and reclamation. You're not allowed, rather, in this county, to dig a hole and then come back later and reclaim. You have to reclaim in a concurrent fashion as soon as you can, based on your mining phases, and that's what this project does. Slope stability and safety. Slopes have to be deemed stable, both interim and final. And revegetation replanting is a critical element. The state standard just picked up by the locals require baseline studies, native plants to be used, monitoring, specific success criteria. And the way that these work together is in order to have good revegetation, you need to have stable slopes. Grading, drainage, and erosion control features. Annual inspections in this county for all mines, unlike many other land uses, is a must. It's not optional. Annual updates to the financial assurances are a must. It's not optional. And lastly, after the county's done with its process of putting the mine through its paces, the whole package is sent up to an expert state agency known as the Department of Conservation, and they review it to ensure that it meets those state standards. And that's occurred in this case, and they found that it indeed complies with those standards. As a discretionary act, of course, CEQA applies. What is the standard that the monstrous EIR in front of you needs to meet? And I think the best standard comes directly out of the CEQA guidelines. It says an EIR should be prepared with a sufficient degree of analysis to provide decision makers with information that allows them to make a decision which intelligently takes account of the environmental consequences. We call that the intelligent and informed decision-making standard. Of course, people aren't going to agree about the contents of the EIR. So disagreements between experts not only are allowed, they're expected. For you as a planning body, you can rely on expert opinion as long as it's supported by substantial evidence. Lastly, sort of wrap-up element of the standard is courts have looked not for perfection, but for adequacy, completeness, and a good faith effort and disclosure. And let me talk about how, in my opinion as a land use attorney, I think that that standard's been met in this case. First, procedural requirements. These are the requirements of CEQA that allow the public full opportunity to vet fairly their views about the project and what they want to see analyzed. The county, I think, did an admirable job. I think that this hearing, the location of this is an example of that. 2 notices of preparation. For each notice of preparation, the public was allowed to put in comments saying what they particularly wanted to be analyzed in the EIR. And the county did not ignore that, and it analyzed those issues in the EIR. There was a public scoping meeting for those who didn't wish to put it in writing but wanted to make their comments orally at a microphone. Over 4 years of preparation of the studies that went into the EIR. When the EIR came out, state law requires 45-day notice. The county said we'll provide 60, and then at the request of the public, provided 120 days notice to ability to comment. I've never been involved in a project in my career where that much time has been provided to provide written comments on the EIR. 1 year was spent responding to 236, did I get that right? Individual letters with over thousands of individual comments within the letters. And then the EIR was released not 10 days before this hearing, as the law requires, but 30 days. So people had an adequate time to look at it. Now let's talk about the substantive compliance. The issues here are complex. You would not be honest if you didn't say that. And so the county, in preparing this EIR, proceeded in a very deliberate fashion in the way they put together the EIR. Here's what they did. For every resource area, they followed a template protocol. They looked at the affected environment, physical features, and laws that apply to that resource area. They looked at the standards of significance. And keep in mind, this county has standards of significance that are more rigorous than those contained in Appendix G of the CEQA guidelines. Then they applied numeric thresholds if those existed. And they do for air. The South Coast has numerical standards for traffic, for noise, and other impact areas. For each impact area, the specific methodology was set forth. And this is important because if you disagree with the conclusion, the first thing you need to understand is how that was arrived at. And there was nothing hidden as far as the precise methodology that was used for each resource area. Impacts were identified. Significant and unavoidable impacts were identified. The EIR includes a local community section. The county wanted to take this complicated EIR and put in one easy-to-find place all of the studies and all of the conclusions concerning Pechanga or concerning Temecula or concerning Duluth. And that was done. That is not required by state law, but it was something that the county felt made the document more useful. Cumulative impacts were identified, project alternatives were identified, and response to comments were made. Last comment I want to make has to do with significant and unavoidable impacts. A significant and unavoidable impact is an impact that remains after all feasible mitigations have been imposed. A mitigation may be infeasible, may not be able to be applied to a project if it can't be brought forward successfully due to technological, legal, environmental, or social concerns. In this case, there were 14 resource areas. 10 were mitigated less than significant, and as Mr. Jones said at the beginning, in 4 areas, significant and unavoidable impacts were claimed. I want to show how they fall into the definitions. Air quality. The Air District has recently said in the letter, as I understand it, that this particular project has applied every state-of-the-art mitigation that the Air District can come up with.
Sir, it is 6 o'clock.
Okay?
And wrap it up.
Thank you. So I'll wrap it up right now. For all of these areas, either technological or environmental or legal reasons prevented full mitigation, and therefore their statements are overriding considerations. So in conclusion, I just simply want to say that from the standpoint of state law, local implementation of that law, and from CEQA, I'm confident that the legal standards have been met here, and I believe it's a good document upon which you can base your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Commission will recess until 7 o'clock.